What is going on, everybody? Hope you're having a good week. So recently, a friend of mine bought the PDP Victrix Pro BFG PS5 controller. Boy, that's a mouthful. I wanted to test it out myself to see if it was actually worth all of the hype and the wait. And I had a few hours with it. And before I get into this review, I just want to address the last video. Yes, I was upset about PDP or Victrix not responding to a lot of people who had questions about shipping, purchasing, and even getting their pre-orders, like myself. So yes, that was a spiteful video last time, and I do apologize. But with this video, I actually got my hands on the cursed controller, and I really wanted to like it. I wanted all of the wait to be worth it. I wanted the overhype and exaggerating comment saying that it's the greatest controller of all time to be correct. But there is a YouTuber out there that actually tells the truth, and they didn't say the best things about it because some people don't follow the hype. And well, after trying it myself, I gotta say, I'm not a fan of the controller. Now, don't get me wrong, just looking at it, it looks incredible. It's modular. The modularity is astonishing. It's unmatched in the modular department. But overall, controller quality is lacking. Firstly, I like to switch between FPS and fighting games, so I thought this controller would be perfect for me. And if I actually did end up liking the controller, I probably would have purchased it for myself and made an apology video. And there are some positives to note about the controller, like the modularity, but the quality of the D-pad is actually very good. You do need to kind of yank on it in order to replace the D-pad, which made me a little nervous. I didn't want to have to buy the controller from this person. But on the initial unboxing, you get a digital manual link. So all you have to do is scan the QR code and it tells you everything you can do with the controller, which mostly has to do with the hotkeys in the back. And so with that, I'll name the first negative. So basically, I didn't like the triggers much. They felt kind of cheap to me. The R1, L1, R2, and L2 had this texture on them that kind of felt like the $20 controllers you get at Walmart. And every time you click on them, it made some kind of hollow, echoey sound. If you're playing a video game at nighttime, it's probably going to wake somebody up if you're near other people in another room, if you have roommates or a significant other that's sleeping. So the triggers are kind of noisy and cheap feeling. Very cheap feeling, in fact. I was incredibly disappointed by just the triggers alone, but that's not the only negative about this controller, unfortunately. So there are these trigger switches on the back, which if you hold them down, separate both switches, and then press the trigger to any extent and let go of the switches, that's where your triggers will be placed. So you can have anything from a hair trigger to a full PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series controller type analog triggers. And that's all well and good if those trigger switches were placed at a better spot, or if they were just like the Elite controller where you just simply set the switch to a particular level for one or the other instead of just holding it down and placing a trigger stop there. The reason this is so annoying to me is because every time I was trying to play Days Gone, I would end up hitting those trigger switches, which automatically brought the controller back to its default hair trigger mode. And it just kept happening for hours. I'm just not used to those switches being there, but not only that, those switches are incredibly delicate. So if you touch it even slightly, it brings the trigger back to hair trigger mode. And I just don't like that. It had enough buttons in the back with the paddles, which I also kept hitting by mistake, but you can set those to off if you want. It's just those paddles are kind of delicate as well, and they're not as flush like the Xbox Elite controller. And yes, I'm comparing it to the Elite controller because it is just as expensive as an Xbox Elite controller. But the only thing, it has modularity, which is great. It would have been even better if the modularity was magnetic like the Xbox Elite 2 and 1, but that's not the case either. There are 2 screws for each modular piece, which you have to screw in. And I was switching them around for a couple minutes and I managed to almost strip one of the screws. And that's the thing. It's not the screw's fault. It's not the company's fault. That's just naturally what happens when you have screws. And it's a standard miniature hex key that you use to screw in, which comes with it, and you can place it inside of the case. The case has so much going on inside of it because there are all these modular pieces, screwdrivers basically, and it's kind of overwhelming when you first open the controller case. But already a few minutes in and I kind of stripped one of the screws, so I needed to press a little harder, and I could see that over time making it more difficult to screw those modular pieces in, which is unfortunate because you pay $200 for this, and one of the modular pieces can easily be useless if you strip a screw, or it could can be stuck in there if you strip that screw. And you'll have to do something as far as drill another indent inside of that screw just to make it useful again. And it would have been better if they had some screw replacements, but they don't. So it made me a little paranoid that I would strip it again. So that disabled me from continuing with my modularity activity. And I can't imagine if I actually owned it, how many times I would switch between these modular pieces and eventually strip almost every screw, probably in a few months. And also, it's a very fine finish and the controller looks amazing. It has all different types of textures on it. And if I managed to either strip the screw or miss the screw, there were already a few surfaces that were scratched a tiny bit. So you're just taking a screwdriver to your new $200 controller. All it does is make you extremely paranoid to the point maybe you're shaking a little bit, or maybe you're a little too careful and the screwdriver slips and scratches your new controller. And then what are you going to do then? Most people, if they got the controller in a week and they scratch it already, probably going to bring it back. So that's a tiny nitpick, but stripping the screw and seeing how easy it is to strip it just didn't sit well with me. But let's get to the biggest problem and the reason I'm probably never going to buy this controller. It doesn't work with Steam Deck. It can connect to Steam Deck. I tried all 3 modes. PC mode worked, but every time, for some reason, I press on the triggers too much, like anytime while playing a first-person shooter, or when I hit those trigger switches by mistake, the tiny light sensor in the middle of the controller starts shining yellow and green. And for some reason, the connection to the Steam Deck drops, even though, which is another negative, the controller comes with a Bluetooth dongle, so latency is extremely low, and it's very hard to have a weak signal with this controller. But unfortunately, on the JSOX dock, the controller just kept disconnecting every time I hit one of the trigger switches in the back. And it was mostly random were the times where it would disconnect. But that's exactly what happened with the Xbox Elite 2 controller when I bought that for the Steam Deck. It just kept dropping. It just doesn't seem to be fully compatible with the Steam Deck. And the Victrix BFG Pro PDP controller had the same exact issue. It just did not work with the Steam Deck. And it has a Bluetooth dongle, which is even stranger. I'm not sure if it was the JSOX dock, but it just kept dropping for the Steam Deck specifically. And I don't like that it has a Bluetooth dongle, not just straight up Bluetooth. But all in all, I found the triggers to be insufferable and the trigger switches just kept getting in the way. And the modularity is the best part about the controller, but is it worth $200? No, it's worth probably $150, judging by the quality of the triggers. And even the analog sticks didn't really have far travel, so it wasn't exactly the most intuitive in terms of playing a first-person shooter with it. It just seems like it's a decent fight pad, and the fight pad buttons are incredible. They're clicky and very high quality. You can tell they put most of their work into the fight pad buttons, which you can also add to and take out modularly. So yeah, I was just having too many issues. And at the time of testing for a few hours, there were a few other people there, and I asked them, hey, do these triggers feel as high quality as a standard PS5 controller to you? And a lot of them were surprised because they've been using the PlayStation 5 controller for some time, and the realization that a PlayStation 5 Pro controller's triggers didn't feel as good as a $70 standard PlayStation 5 controller, and the triggers just automatically turned them off, to the point that some of them were between getting the Wolverine V2 Pro and this one, and they decided to go with the Wolverine V2 Pro. And I tried that controller myself, and I've got to say that controller is incredible for the Steam Deck, and it is wild for PC games too. Almost everything on the controller is clicky, so you know it's going to last a long time, and the D-pad feels surprisingly good on the V2 Pro. But like with this one, someone bought it and I tried it because it is $250. Is it worth $250? I think so, but it doesn't come with rumble just like the Victrix BFG. And because of that, both controllers are considerably light, and I'm assuming they are sort of made for fighting games, and all of that technology for the low latency kind of takes up space inside of the controller as well. I just don't see why they couldn't add rumble features or even DualSense features, considering that the V2 Pro is $250. Is that worth $250 to me? Heck no. But is the Victrix Pro BFG worth $200? I don't think so. I think if you want to get a controller with a great D-pad, modularity, and premium triggers, you should go with the Elite 2. And then you can switch back to the standard PlayStation 5 controller, not the Edge, because that controller's battery life is abysmal. The standard PlayStation 5 controller already feels like a premium controller. And considering it's $70, I think you're spending enough for it, since you're most likely going to break it at some point. And just holding a $200 controller feels ridiculous. I wouldn't pay that much for anything. And the modularity, I'm glad that PDP went that direction. I think they should keep going with that creative, unique controller standard from this point on, but they definitely need to fix those trigger switches, connectivity with the Steam Deck. I'm sure that Valve is going to fix that at some point. And the trigger quality needs to be so much better. The trigger itself takes up a lot of room on your finger, so that's actually very cool, but it just doesn't feel heavy at all. The triggers have no weight to them, meaning if you want to time something, you're probably going to slip and pull the trigger too early in anticipation of the shot. And also for the fact that you're just used to a standard controller like the Xbox or PlayStation where the trigger has some weight to it. So yes, I give the controller a 5 out of 10. 5 points for modularity and battery life, but it's kind of uncomfortable. And also it's a bit small. I'm sure that was for portability reasons, so you could just take it on the go or if you're traveling, but that's got to be one of the smallest controllers I've used in a while. Is it something special? You could say that. To me, it's mostly a gimmick because those screws are going to come loose at some point. They're going to strip. Just unscrewing and screwing something as expensive as $200 consistently just bugs me. And I'm not sure how so many people are talking such positive words about this controller when the triggers feel so cheap. And I wasn't aware that so many people played fighting games. I thought fighting games was sort of niche. Considering how many people play Fortnite and Call of Duty, I'm surprised more gamers didn't pick up on the lacking trigger quality. And I think that's a big negative for me. I play a lot of shooting games, a lot of games that require precision and triggers, but the D-pad on it is pretty darn good. But if you're trying to buy this controller for Steam Deck, it just doesn't seem like it's going to work because it doesn't work on mine. But that will be the end of this era. I'm not going to talk about this controller anymore. In my opinion, it's a mediocre and overrated controller that just looks cool and has cool features, but ultimately its build quality defeats its purpose, and that is to make gaming as comfortable as possible. And I did not feel comfortable while using this controller. It's too small, has so many buttons, and you're just bound to touch the wrong button and disconnect the controller or something or the other. It connects easy enough, but it's just another overhyped PlayStation 5 Pro controller, just like the Wolverine V2 Pro. But to me, the Wolverine V2 Pro is actually better. It just feels better. It connects a lot more consistently. And yeah, that's been my official review of the PDP Victrix Pro BFG PlayStation 5 wireless controller. And I'm so happy I never have to search or say that name ever again. But I do want to thank PDP for not replying or not giving me any kind of direct answer to anything. I've had to go online and tell people exactly why it's delayed and so hard to get, but I did see after some time they were trying very hard to push out the controller and give people what they wanted. And a lot of people are going to be happy if they just use it as a fight pad. But if you want it for anything else, you're probably most likely going to be disappointed, especially if you want that controller for competitive games. I wouldn't rely on it since those trigger switches are a little too close and delicate to even start to be considered reliable. But yeah, if I were to recommend any kind of controller with good battery life, great feeling buttons, it would be the Wolverine V2 Pro. I think that's an underrated controller. I think a lot of people that don't like it don't exactly see the value in clicky buttons and how they will ultimately last longer than standard buttons. I'll probably be getting that controller again opposed to the Victrix Pro BFG. It's such a shame because I really wanted to be wrong about this controller. But I was also having some connectivity issues with my PC just once. For some reason in big picture mode, it wasn't reading it for a while. But when I finally started to play around with it, it worked flawlessly. But the triggers just bothered me too much. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about this controller without having your buyer goggles on. Just forget about the fact that you pay $200 and you are this controller slave, and just think about how comfortable the controller is for you. And let me know what you think about the controller. And have you tried the Wolverine V2 Pro? Let me know in the comments below. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Later.
It's poisonous.